We're very lucky in Australia that we're this island continent, giant island continent, where evolution just happened different. We're spoiled for what we see every day. I think that's just human nature. If you get to see the most gorgeous, brightly coloured bird every single morning, you become to expect it. And then reptiles, I think we're also definitely known as the place where everything can kill you, because we've got giant crocodiles, the most deadly snakes and spiders in the world. We've got everything.
It's true. Australia is home to some of the biggest and most deadly snakes and spiders in the world. And learning about the way these creatures evolved really shows us a lot about the environment here.
We do have some very large spiders, sort of as big as your hand. And look, the funnel web is big. You know, they have fangs that are almost like a snake's fang.
Check this guy out. This is the Australian funnel-web spider, literally one of the most dangerous spiders in the world. They are called funnel webs because they actually make burrows that are shaped like funnels. They can kill a human in 15 minutes, and they can even bite through shoe leather. I'm telling you about them because their deadliness is likely because of a quirk of evolution. And then there's this guy. This is the inland taipan, one of the deadliest snakes on the planet. Guess where you can find him? In Australia. Sounds terrifying and amazing. But again, just like the spiders, the snakes are just the result of the environment.
Every landscape has its harshness for sure, and every single animal has evolved its own way to benefit in that environment, whether it's bigger ears for better hearing, nose for smell and eyes for eyesight. And it's just a belief that, again, because we were this island that separated off so early, is that we just evolved different down here.
Australia is also home to a whole set of animals that you can only find here. One of Australia's most iconic animals, the koala, is endemic to the country, meaning their species can only be found here. Now, you may know that koalas are marsupials, and I don't know about you, but I never really stopped to think about what marsupials actually are. Marsupials are kind of a species that give birth very early and then continue to develop the newborn babies outside of the uterus.
So a koala is born, spends 3 to 6 months within the pouch, and then at about that age they will then emerge, move over onto mum's back, and then spend almost another 6 months with mum, but learning the ropes that way. When you start to imagine why marsupials evolved the way that they did, you do look at the landscape of Australia, and it is a very harsh environment. And in a way, the marsupial birth strategy is almost a way to protect mum through it all. If we go and compare, say, a koala to an elephant, a koala gives birth after 3 weeks. Her body has done very little to actually put much of what she needed to energy-wise into that baby. So if things go bad and the baby's lost, mum can survive. An elephant, on the other hand, pregnant for almost 2 years, no matter what seasons come from the moment of conception, mum's body is going to put everything first into that baby. And if it's 2 years of horrendous drought and famine, then both can be lost. As harsh as it sounds, it's so that mum will survive in Australia with such a small baby that she can decide just to not keep going with.
Get it? Those pouches aren't just cute carrying cases, they're adaptations that allow the mother to survive in the harsh environment by giving birth very early on. And speaking of giving birth early on, let's take a look at that other mammal type that just breaks nearly every rule. Monotremes, like the platypus or the echidna. Monotremes are mammals that lay eggs.
For so many years it was believed it was fictitious, that this was some joke being played back in England when they sent these specimens back home. If you made it up, it wouldn't be believed.
Speaking of things that you would not believe, did you know that some wombats have square poops?
We have icons and we have animals that should be icons, and that list is long. One of my personal favourites is a wombat.
Wombats poop cubes. And why, oh why do they poop cubes? Well, according to scientists in Tasmania, wombats may use their poop to communicate to each other. They tend to place their poop in very prominent places, and round objects tend to, roll. Whereas cubes stay put. Talk about divergent evolution.
It is much more square shaped, so you can use that for pub trivia. If you're in the top of North Queensland, you've got tree kangaroos and cassowaries. You come down to Sydney where the koalas and the kangaroos flourish. We head down to the bottom parts of Victoria and you see penguins that are coming up and escaping from seals. Across into South Australia where you see different species of wombats that have thrived and survived in that red sand. Across to the other coast of Australia where we have giant whale sharks that inhabit coral reefs that people don't even know are there. You could honestly circle this continent a dozen times and still be coming across new things. One of the really interesting things with Australia being the island is that we sort of diverge differently, but one of the scary things about that is we're a closed population. One of the most important things for any species is what they call genetic drift, where you have different genes that were over in this population that can then flow into this one and both get strengthened. When you talk about an island, there's no flow, which means that you start to bottleneck genetically, which is the real fear. And that's what we certainly see with a lot of different species.
Without genetic drift, the species can become way more susceptible to little chance things in the environment, which means they're more likely to become extinct. And that's happening to koalas right now. There simply isn't enough genetic diversity in the koala population to keep them healthy and thriving.
If we're not careful, we could lose them in the wild in the next generation. And if you actually just stop and think about that as a statement, like how could that be possible?
Now that's a scary thought, but unfortunately, it is possible. That thought is part of why Chad has devoted his life to this work, and at least once it got personal. This is baby Archer. He was born at Featherdale Wildlife Park in Australia in November 2013. Archer lived in his mother's pouch, but when it was time to emerge, things turned bad. Archer's mom abandoned him.
It's the hardest thing to ever have to do in this job, is to make that decision to intervene. You've got to back your decision at that point. So I started raising Archer. I had almost like a humidity crib that was a transportable thing to go from my home back to the park. And I erected a makeshift perch in that to teach him to start holding on like you would have to in the wild. If you imagine a marsupial baby inside the pouch, they have food on tap. So whenever they get hungry, they can start to suckle. And it was my job to mimic that as best as I could, which meant small feeds at regular intervals to make sure that we were reaching those targets of growth.
Archer passed away in 2022, but his story remains a small miracle and a reminder of what happens when we protect a threatened bit of a species that you only can find here.
Look, you're not supposed to have favourites, but you do, of course. You don't ever tell the ones that aren't favourites that, but you do. He became amazing around so many people and really became an ambassador for the species. But yeah, I made a great mate out of it, to be honest.